Well, financial expert and insider Catherine Austin Fitz will be joining us to do our first interview of 2012. It is Monday, the second day of January, 2012. It's Infowars Nightly News. Thank you for joining us. We have grave tidings, obviously, for you this evening. Our top story, the NDAA was signed by President Barack Hussein Obama in the final hours of 2011, when I guess they thought no one would notice. And we understand why they wanted to hide this. They don't want public opposition to mount to what they are doing. Now, the question is, can you legalize tyranny? Can you legalize bringing slavery back? If, say, Italy, 2,000 years ago in Rome, slavery was legal for anybody. Most of the slaves were white. So they could say, hey, we did it before, precedent. We're going to go to, say, France and grab 10,000 people and bring them here and make them be our slaves. Could you legalize slavery? Could you legalize barbecuing children, as I've said many times, on the White House lawn? Could you legalize horrible things like animal cruelty or pedophilia? No, you cannot legalize it. There is an organic, universal right to say no to it. And the former land of the free, home of the brave that had the most due process, checks and balances, now is a leading light of darkness worldwide, or black sunshine, you could call it, to steal a line from White Zombie. That's what we're dealing with here, where they go further than North Korea on paper and say, we'll arrest citizens and have them disappear into a black hole forever. We will torture citizens. We want you to be afraid. You can be stripped of your citizenship as well and flown to some black site or secret site that our criminal government has set up all over the Middle East and Eastern Europe. And so, of course, they lied and said, oh, don't worry, it doesn't affect citizens. And then it came out it did affect citizens. Obama said, I'll veto it. And then it turned out behind the scenes he was pressuring people to support it. They do this because they're liars and because they don't want to admit what they're doing so that public opposition can mount. They want to have CNN and Fox News get up there and say, it's okay, it doesn't affect U.S. citizens, while it does. And they want to be able to have Obama go to his constituents and say, I'm against it, when he actually signed it. So it's like a hall of mirrors or something where you never know what's true or what isn't. And that's what they're looking for, is this fog of war where everybody is basically confused. But this is a real wake-up call for everyone, that tyranny is here in our republic, and the corrupt ruling class who created over $1,000 trillion in fake assets or derivatives, the big mega banks that have taken over our government and financed both political parties, now know that we're waking up. And so they're trying to at least put it on paper that, yeah, we'll spy on you without warrants. Yeah, we'll set up domestic checkpoints. Yeah, we'll federalize your local police. Yeah, we'll build FEMA camps. We'll go ahead and activate them. And we're going to start censoring the internet. Yeah, the SOPA Act really does do that. And yes, we're going to secretly arrest Americans whenever we want and disappear you into another region. That's being done on multiple fronts to intimidate and scare people that are awake and involved. And it's being done because the power structure is afraid. The power structure is scared and is trying to protect themselves from a public that they've robbed and abused. So here's the different reports. Obama signing statement on NDAA. I have the power to detain Americans, but I won't. If you go to our article, it has his signing statement where he says that he won't implement the secret arrest and disappearance of U.S. citizens. But again, he still signed the law. He didn't bring in a line item veto, which he doesn't technically have, but which he basically had by threatening a general veto. He, I'll say it again, demanded that the legislation be put in there. Let's go ahead and go to this clip of Senator Carl Levin when he was getting blamed for all this. And he does deserve some of the blame. I mean, you can't have these two ping-ponging it back and forth, like pass the hand grenade and saying, well, Obama wants it, well, Carl Levin wants it. But the point is, he didn't want to get the blame, so he came out and said, look, it's Obama that wants this, and that's since been confirmed. Here it is.
And I'm wondering whether the senator is familiar with the fact that the language which precluded the application of Section 1031 to American citizens was in the bill that we originally approved in the Armed Services Committee, and the administration asked us to remove the language which says that U.S. citizens and lawful residents would not be subject to this section. Is the senator familiar with the fact that it was the administration that asked us to remove the very language which we had in the bill which passed the committee, and that we removed it at the request of the administration, that would have said that this determination would not apply to U.S. citizens and lawful residents? I'm just wondering, is the senator familiar with the fact that it was the administration which asked us to remove the very language, the absence of which is now objected to by the senator from Illinois?
I'm familiar now because the senator from Michigan has shared that fact with me.
Now, I know here on the Nightly News, I've probably played that clip 5 times in the last month. We played it on the radio. It's admitted. The ACLU's done an analysis. Ron Paul has done it. Major legal law firms and think tanks have looked at it. The senators that wrote it admit it's for U.S. citizens. But for a month, we had to have debates about whether it affected citizens or not. Now, why did they do that? To kill opposition. Again, why did Obama say that he was going to veto the bill? So that people thought, well, let's not oppose it. He's just going to veto it anyways. The whole time he was the one demanding it be in there. That is, his handlers were. That's how these political people work. That's how their deception operates. That's how they get this stuff done. In fact, coming up in a minute, we've got the headline where they announced, oh, they pulled the bestiality section out of the NDAA, saying the troops can basically bring barn animals, into the bases. And then Senator Cornyn, when he got criticized for passing that out of Texas, he came out and said, well, we've stripped it, but they had the House add it back in. That's going to come up. Well, here it is. Bestiality and sodomy repeal stripped from NDAA. Then if you scroll down, they've got a link to the government track site, and they've got the letter from Cornyn saying he had it stripped, but he knew full well and voted later to accept it when the bill came back from the House. And so now it's the law that bestiality is legal in the military. But at the end of the day, I want to state this. They want to keep this stuff secret because they know it's outrageous and they don't want to be publicly rebuked for it. They want to just implement the law, quietly find cops and military that'll follow unconstitutional orders, and they don't want us there the whole time pointing out it's illegal and wrong. Again, it's illegal to pass a law saying black people aren't humans again and are slaves. And it's illegal to say we're all slaves and have no due process or rights and can disappear into a torture camp. So again, this is all a fraud, and tyrants always try to create legalese to rationalize what they're doing. But as a human being, I have a right to say no to it and to decry it. So they're not strong. They're doing this because they're weak and they're scared of the public waking up to them. And because they want to have it on paper that they can start using the military and hitmen and contractors against the American people. Remember, Obama said and has been using these new powers he declared for himself to kill U.S. citizens he claims are connected to terrorists. Well, don't you want to capture them then if they have such great intel? Don't you want to give them a trial so we can actually hear the facts? No, they just say they're terrorists, so they don't deserve rights, and now they're saying the American people are terrorists. Now, I have another report here because this legislation says they can secretly arrest, torture, or kill citizens, but following an older piece of legislation in the previous defense authorization for enemy combatants, they say we won't secretly arrest or kill or torture citizens, but the Secretary of Defense or the President can strip you extrajudicially of your citizenship, and then you disappear to a black site, a torture camp overseas. In places like Egypt and Romania, these sites have been exposed. So now on top of it, they've introduced another bill, H.R. 3166, Enemy Expatriation Act. But notice it says that if your speech supports the hostilities, if what you're doing and saying, and we've seen attorney generals say that if you criticize a war, you're aiding terrorists, that citizens don't have a right to be against a war, you could be disappeared into a black hole. So they're trying that as well. You just saw Senator Levin saying the White House demanded this. That's why we added this in there. You can go to the legislative record and see that as well. We don't just take Levin's word for it. Then we have some of these other clips. We'll just play the clips and then come back and comment on them.
And to those American citizens thinking about helping al-Qaeda, please know what will come your way. Death, detention, prosecution. And when they say, I want my lawyer, you tell them, shut up.
Your time is expired.
Get a lawyer. You're an enemy combatant, and we're going to talk to you about why you joined al-Qaeda.
But you read the legislation, it's for the American people, and they admit it is. So it's this idea of al-Qaeda. So you should be arrested, Lindsey Graham. You've supported the Libyan attack, and they've now put real al-Qaeda in charge there. And I could pull up London Telegraph headlines and others. Al-Qaeda flag now flies over Tripoli. I mean, our own government created al-Qaeda. That's on record. But you always invoke it. Give up your rights or al-Qaeda will get you. Let's go ahead and go to the next clip.
James Madison, the father of the Constitution, warned, the means of defense against foreign danger historically have become instruments of tyranny at home. Abraham Lincoln had similar thoughts, saying, America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves. My well-intentioned colleagues' admonitions in defending provisions of this defense bill, yes, their legislation would arm the military with the authority to detain indefinitely, without due process or trial, people suspected of an association with terrorism. These would include American citizens apprehended on American soil. I want to repeat that. We are talking about people who are merely suspected of terrorism or suspected of committing a crime and have been judged by no court. We are talking about American citizens that could be taken from the United States and sent to a camp at Guantanamo Bay. A suspect, we're not talking about someone who has been tried and found guilty. We're talking about someone suspected of activities. But some of the things that make you suspicious of terrorism are having food, having more than 7 days of food, missing fingers on your hand, having ammunition, having weatherproofed ammunition, having several guns at your house. Is that enough? Are you willing to sacrifice your freedom for liberty? I would argue that we should strike these detainee provisions from this bill because we are giving up our liberty. We are giving up the constitutional right to have due process before we're sent to a prison. This is very...
Isn't that a breath of fresh air? That's what the media says is radical. Now, we've also got the clip of Lieberman, just incredibly creepy, where he's talking about, we don't want you to know what the torture is. We want you to be scared. I mean, that's terrorism right there. We don't want anybody to know you've been arrested, and we don't want anybody to know what our interrogation methods are because we want you to be scared.
When a member of al-Qaeda or a similar associated terrorist group is captured, I want that person to be terrified about what's going to happen to them in American custody. I want them not to know what's going to happen. I want the terror that they inflict on others to be felt by them as a result of the uncertainty of not knowing that they can look on the internet and find exactly what our interrogators are going to be limited to.
The law of the land is that if you choose to help al-Qaeda, you've committed an act of war against your fellow citizens, and you can be held as an enemy combatant for an indeterminate period of time so we can gather intelligence about what you may have done or about what you know about the enemy.
Can you think of anything more creepy than these corrupt senators that have helped the foreign banks gut this country and sent all our jobs overseas, who use this national security state to operate in secrecy, and now they want to start arresting us and dragging us off in the night, and no one knows where we went? Can you imagine the abuses that are going to come from this? I mean, it doesn't get any more textbook than this. The only thing we've got left is the Second Amendment and the First Amendment, which the American people are still exercising openly, which is good. And between those two prongs, that pincer attack, if we boldly stand up and tell the truth with our First Amendment, we can avert using the Second Amendment. Now, here's the numbers. A record 1.5+ million instant FBI checks. And on average, they did a survey, the average person was buying 2.1 guns. Now, again, instant FBI checks are only from federal firearms dealers. It's estimated that around 30% more guns are sold from individuals to other hands. There's 400 million guns in this country. So you double 2.1 guns sold, you're talking about 3 million plus guns sold with 1.5 million background checks. 3 million guns sold in December alone, on top of the 400 million guns in this country of new manufacture. This is an armed camp, and I think that's beautiful, because nothing equalizes the good guy versus the bad guy like guns. You take Mexico. Great people, a lot of courage, total slaves. Because the military and the government has the guns and the citizens are totally barred from owning firearms. So only the criminals and the gangs and the government are armed. The answer here is arming more people as an equalizer. And I saw a national survey last week of why these gun sales were so high. And the average person said government collapse, civil unrest, and they went on to say, we don't trust the government. So what does that say to the system? The people are arming against the government, just as the Founding Fathers said we should do. People are finally figuring out what the liberty teeth are for, as George Washington called them. Now, I'm not calling for some violent confrontation. We need to reach out to the military and police, who, by the way, are good people on average and are waking up. But what message is that to the pushers of the NDAA and the rest of them? What message is that to you that the people are doing this? This is not going to be like Germany or Russia or China, where people were not armed. This is not going to go well for you. And you may think you're going to be able to finagle some civil war and sit offshore while this happens and get away with it. When we get America back, globalists, you're going to be brought to justice. And if you make us go through some horrible civil war and some giant war crime operation where your people commit war crimes, you're going to be doubly brought to justice. Back off now. Abandon your eugenics program. Abandon your New World Order. Because you can look at the facts. You can listen to Brzezinski a year and a half ago in 2010 tell you at your own CFR you're going to lose. Your whole New World Order plan was based on us being in the dark. You're not going to be able to get away with this when we have your whole playbook. And we know what order the plays are going to be played in. Checkmate. You might be able to kill some of us individually, but you're not going to kill this idea of freedom. You're not going to get away with this. You're in check. If you continue to move in the direction you're going, you're checkmate. Now, let's continue. You saw that little short clip where they said he thinks Hamas was set up by Israel. Well, that's funny. I happen to have Haaretz right here in front of me, and it says that Israel right here set up Hezbollah. Israel created Hezbollah. There it is right there. Israel created Hezbollah. Let's continue. I have another quote right here. This is out of the Wall Street Journal. People may have heard of that. How Israel helped spawn Hamas. Oh! The system counts on you being petty, being thin-skinned, being very, very shallow. And it is wild that Israel created Hamas. Because we're told give all our liberties up because they're going to kill us every minute. You know, the evil Hamas. And then if you mention, hey, Israel and other governments created, our government created Al-Qaeda, they're like, oh, shut up. And then national security advisors, former government chiefs write books bragging that they created al-Qaeda. And you can buy the book and go, look, Brzezinski wrote this, it's on this page. Here, David Rockefeller wrote this book and admits he wants global governance and the end of the family. And it's like, shut up, you're a kook. Folks, only waking up and facing reality is going to save our society. It's that simple. I hope you'll appreciate this information and get it out to everybody you know, because the truth will set us free. The people perish for lack of knowledge. I've only covered the top 1 or 2% of the news we had today. It's that big. Reality is that huge. Don't believe everything I say, but research what I say and find out it's far worse than I could even relay to you. Reality is so much more complex than what is regurgitated on the big four networks every night with the same news story in the same order with the same sponsors. That simplistic centralization is there to sell you tyranny and slavery. And that entire establishment media system is bombarding and attacking Ron Paul because he is only one manifestation or one focal point of this global awakening that's taking place. Here's the new campaign ad. We've got it at Infowars.com if you want to get it out to folks. Believe. Ron Paul releases closing argument ad. Watch Paul's final message before voting begins. All right, here's the Ron Paul ad. We'll be right back with Catherine Austin Fitts.